Hey, what's going on, everyone? And welcome to episode 11 of the Alec Walt Show. I'm your host, Alec Walt, alongside another very special guest. And today we're talking about the New Orleans Saints. Yes, in the first round yesterday, they probably made one of the most questionable picks of the entire first round. And to break down who the newest New Orleans Saint is Michael Balko, host of the Michael Balko Show and contributor at Who Dat Dish. Michael, welcome back, man. Number 2.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Happy to be back.
Awesome. Well, last night we were all watching the draft. When you heard Roger Goodell go up to the podium and say, with the what pick you guys have 28 with the 28th pick of the 2021 NFL draft, the New Orleans Saints select Payton Turner out of Houston. What were your thoughts when you heard that?
I mean, initially, I think I was probably disappointed, just like the majority of Saints fans. You know, it's just like we'd sat there for about 10 minutes listening to them talk about how we're going to take Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and the next thing you know, we're taking Payton Turner. And then, I mean, the common fan, you know, don't really know too much about Payton Turner. You know, he's a defensive end from Houston. Not too many people knew about him. Very much an under the radar kind of guy. Thankfully, I had done about 20,000 mock drafts between a 3-month span. So I kind of had a general idea of who he was, but he had never made it past like midway through the second round on any of my mock drafts. So I was a little bit taken aback. But yeah, my initial reaction was not as great as my reaction is now. So
tell me, what about it now?
What about my initial reaction?
No. Like, what is your thoughts about it now?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think it's a pick that makes a lot of sense. I think it's a pick that is the kind of pick you make whenever you're a Super Bowl contending team. And here's the reason why. So the Saints, they always are playing chess instead of checkers. You know, they're always 3 moves ahead of everybody else. And well, most teams, I could say, I guess. Not everybody else. Bill Belichick's the king of that. But, you know, in the NFC, we kind of run it. So yeah, so I feel like, you know, our bread and butter over the past few years, I was just talking about it with my boy Merv on his podcast last night. Kind of the bread and butter of the New Orleans Saints has always been the offense and the defensive line. So stabilizing the defensive line, especially in a year where there's a bunch of offensive uncertainty with Drew Brees now being retired and things along the lines of that. You know, a lot of just question marks in general with the Saints, you know, in their cornerback position, their linebacker position. There's a lot of question marks, but there is experience in those positions. So while there may not be, you know, maybe we didn't take Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in the first round, but that doesn't mean we can't potentially trade up in the second round to get him. Or, you know, it doesn't mean that, you know, we don't already have some talented dudes, because I know the Saints are very much high on Zach Bond. They're very much high on some of the corners they already have. But Payton Turner, I think he's going to be a really good defensive end. I know I just kind of jumped from like one topic to another, but he's 6'5", 270. Yeah, I think the initial reaction was just kind of like he's just a Marcus Davenport 2.0, but he did play at a little bit higher of a level at Houston rather than UTSA like Davenport did. I mean, he only started 4 games last season, still managed to get 25 tackles, 10.5 of them for a loss and 5 sacks. So I think, you know, that's pretty impressive to me. And I mean, he had a hand injury. He suffered coronavirus. He got a Senior Bowl invite. We know how much Saints love Senior Bowl players. That's where they got Adam Troutman last year. They saw him at the Senior Bowl. So they saw something that made him stick out enough to where he's a first-round pick. And I guess it came out after the pick was made that he was being projected to be picked in the 20 to 30 range. Obviously, the Saints only had 1 pick in that range. They didn't have to trade up to get him like they did Davenport. I think it's a solid overall pick at 28.
So is he a guy that's ready to play today, or is he still need some time to get fully up to NFL speed?
So the NFL projects him to be starting within the next 2 years. I think he could start for the Saints right away. It's a little bit of a weird situation with the Saints and their defensive end core, because obviously we have Cam Jordan, who's been the anchor of the Saints defensive line for years. And then we have Marcus Davenport, where there's a lot of question marks surrounding him and his potential. Obviously, they just picked up the 5th-year option on him, which was a little bit of a surprise, especially considering they drafted a defensive end in the first round. And then we also have Carl Granderson, as well as Passanio, whatever, the dude from the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm looking at his name right now. I have no idea how to pronounce it. We'll go with that.
It's like Teno Compassignon or whatever his name is.
Something like that.
Yeah. So it comes as a little bit of a surprise that the first round pick was a defensive end, but it also makes sense because we lost Trey Hendrickson and we lost Malcolm Brown on the defensive tackle spot. We lost Sheldon Rankins. And I know Payton Turner as well as Marcus Davenport both have that ability to play on the inside as well as the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So Payton Turner may not be a starter day one, but he'll definitely see time on the field. He'll definitely be our rotational guy. The Saints don't like to groom their players, especially if they're picked in the first round. They like to just get them on the field. So I definitely think Payton Turner, especially if he has a strong offseason, has definitely the ability to leapfrog a couple guys on the depth chart and make an immediate impact on the Saints.
So the Saints still have, 6 more rounds. There's plenty more to go in the draft. Now that Turner's off the board, what do you think are some other needs for the Saints in this draft?
I mean, obviously linebacker and corner, we got to address those at some point. The way my mock draft is kind of playing out, I just released it on my Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff, but it's looking like linebacker is probably going to be the likely selection in the second round, unless the Saints happen to move up and be in play for Asante Samuel or something along the lines of that. But it's looking like more than likely linebacker is going to be – that's where like the great value is going to be for the Saints in the second round. There's going to be a bunch of guys falling. I have names written down actually. Yeah. So some of the guys I have falling late into the second round, Nick Bolton. I have Baron Browning. That's who I have the Saints taking in the second round. Joseph Asai, another defensive end. He can play linebacker too. There's just going to be a lot of good linebackers in the second round. I know the Saints are pretty high on Nick Bolton, so that could be a potential option. So there's just a bunch of different scenarios that the Saints can really consider, but I definitely think linebackers the move in round 2, and then you start to look at like some of the sleeper picks at corner and maybe even quarterback in Kyle Trask in round 3.
Well, I'm looking at your mock right now. So for those of you who want to look at it, it's on Michael Balko's Twitter page at Michael Balko Jr. Okay, so there's New Orleans, like you mentioned with Browning. Man, you have Brown and St. Brown going the next 2 picks after. Why not consider receiver there?
Yeah, I think it's just more of a Saints move to make.
Good answer.
Yeah, it's just the Saints. They have a tendency to love Ohio State players. They have they know they need it. They have a need at linebacker, and I think that there's still some good value on the free agent market and like the cornerback range. Like I was mentioning with my boy Merv last night, like Richard Sherman. He's definitely still on the Saints' radar. He's waiting till after the draft to sign. And if they take a corner in the first or second, maybe even the third round, I don't think Sherman's going to be that attracted to the Saints anymore. So I think the Saints are trying to protect that potential investment in getting a guy like Richard Sherman to come in and be an immediate player at corner while they still develop some guys behind him. Which is something I think a lot of Saints fans are forgetting, is that like Richard Sherman hasn't signed yet, with the ties with Chris Richard and the fact that he's already been linked to the Saints and things like that. I have people telling me that the Saints are still very much interested in him. So I'm going with my gut there and saying that the Saints were probably going to take a linebacker tonight. And then potentially I think they could go receiver quarterback in the third round. They have 2 picks in the third round. I think Kyle Trask is a legitimate option in the third round, as well as
that'd be nice.
Yeah, I think Kyle Trask could be really good with the Saints, especially backing up Jameis Winston. And, who knows? I mean, I'm hearing some mumblings about trade rumors. Who knows? I just know that I hope this defensive end pick in the first round makes a lot more sense soon. Kind of one of the things I tweeted out yesterday was just like maybe the reason the Saints picked up the 5th-year option of Marcus Davenport is to make a deal with him look a little bit more attractive. So maybe they're looking to shop out Marcus Davenport. Same thing we talked about earlier this year with Taysom Hill's contract. The way that's kind of maneuvered is to make it a little bit more attractive, kind of give the team a little bit more control over his contract. So I think, those are a couple guys who are certainly on the trade radar, especially if the Saints are trying to make a play for Kyle Trask or Kellen Mond. Those are 2 really, really big names to watch out for in the second and third round. If the Saints are really trying to make a splash and make a play for one of those 2 guys, which I know the Saints are high on both of them, then that's definitely in the realm of possibility. And a guy like Taysom Hill or Marcus Davenport, their names could be tossed around in a potential trade. I would not be surprised at all if the Saints made a splash to trade into the top 5 picks of the second round and try and get maybe even Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah again. They could still be in play for him. You know what I mean? It would not surprise me. Yeah, and honestly, especially since the way the Saints were talking yesterday about potentially trading up into the top 10, it seems like they want to be aggressive. And, there's still a ton of great talent. I mean, the Saints are going to get great talent if they just stick with where they're at in the second round. And they don't even have to move to get great talent, but they could get starting caliber talent right away if they decided to move up and make a splash. And I could 100% see them doing that, to either get a quarterback or maybe even get one of these top-notch players like Asante Samuel, maybe like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah or Elijah Moore is on the radar as well. There's a lot of good talent in the second round. A lot of talent I did not think was going to be there in the second round, which tends to be the case every year. But the Jacksonville Jaguars played it well, man. Trayvon Moehrig, I thought he was going to be their second first round
So you
pick.
think he's going to go first overall today? Why is that?
It's just that's who I had him taken in the first round, and the fact that he's still going to be sitting there, it's a huge need for the Jaguars. And he's just a great overall playmaker. I'm surprised. I mean, it's the same thing with like the defensive tackle position. Safety and defensive tackle are the two worst positions in the draft this year in terms of early rounds, but it's going to be the kind of picks that have a huge impact in the later rounds. We kind of saw that a few years back when the Saints took Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I mean, he's a starting nickel slot corner for the Saints right now. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be very similar this year with other teams and them getting late round safeties like Javon Holland from Oregon or Trayvon Moehrig from TCU. I think the Jaguars are going to get a steal because he's literally, that's the pick I thought they were going to take in the first round. And just the way things played out, they were able to take ETN and not have to worry about, taking a safety in the first round. And it didn't look like anybody else was going to take a safety. They played that 100% perfectly, and they're going to get him in the first pick. Like, I would be so surprised if they happen to trade that pick because Moehrig just seems like a perfect fit. He's kind of been linked to the Jaguars since in all of my mock drafts, at least, and all the ones that I've seen recently. So I was a little bit shook by that one. But yeah, I think if the Saints, happen to still keep that aggressive mentality, potentially try and move up into the first round, or not in the first round, up into the first like 5-10 picks of the second round, they could still be in play for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah or however you say his last name. Koramoah. Okay. Yeah. So they could still be in play for him. And then I think it would put a lot more Saints fans at ease because then it's like, all right, so the guy we passed up on, we still got, which was kind of the similar situation last season whenever we passed on Zach Bond and Adam Troutman, still managed to get them in the third round. So it ended up paying off. It just kind of makes the first round pick doesn't make it seem as bad, like sure we could have gotten Tyson Campbell. I think that's what it is. The corner from Georgia. Yeah. No, that wasn't Tyson Campbell. It was the other guy from Georgia that went in the first round.
Yeah. He went to the Packers.
Yeah. I don't think the Saints wanted to get a grabby corner. So it makes sense. I think they were really hoping for Farley, and since Farley didn't drop, I just think that they thought Tennessee was going to take Newsome. And so whenever Farley was picked and then Newsome was picked right after by the Cleveland Browns, I think it was just kind of like, oh, dang, because it looked like they were in good shape to land one of those two guys at 28 without having to move up. And so at that point, I think it was just kind of a last minute decision really to take Payton Turner. And it was just more or less, I don't think they went into the first round like Payton Turner or bust. I think they kind of went in with the mentality of we could potentially get in. I think the quarterback they were talking about wanting to trade up to pick is Justin Fields. I think they were potentially considering let's move up and get Justin Fields. And then when a couple corners came off the board early, they were just kind of like, all right, maybe we should shift our focus to somewhere else. I think they were hoping Zaven Collins would fall. I think they were hoping Jamin Davis would fall. Neither of those dudes fell. They were gone in the first 20 picks. And it's just the entire draft strategy the Saints had, I feel like, just kind of went the complete opposite way. And you could kind of tell in Sean Payton's post first round interview, he was a little bit tense, and rightfully so. I mean, because he thought he was going to be in position to have Zaven Collins, Jamin Davis, at least one of these dudes, Greg Newsome or Caleb Farley, and none of those guys were there. And so it's just like, all right, who did we really like at the Senior Bowl? Who do we think has a lot of potential? And then let's try to make a splash in round two. So, and that guy was Payton Turner. And I'm actually kind of intrigued to see what he brings to the Saints. Obviously, you don't want to see a first-round defensive end, but it's also too early. We're basing it off the first round. I like to grade a draft by the entire draft, and I think the Saints could really add some complementary picks in the second and third rounds of this draft for sure. to make that pick a little bit more sexy.
So you talked about possibly trading up into the top 5 to get another first-round talent early in the second round. Looking at your picks right now, it goes 60, 98, 105, 133. You really only have 4 more picks there in the next couple rounds. If you move up, does that completely eliminate your chance of getting someone like Trask?
I think if we move up, it's probably going to be to get Trask.
But you wouldn't move up into the top 5 to get him.
No, I don't know. It's really hard. I think, if anything, the Saints are probably going to try and make a trade and get rid of some of next year's picks. So I think if they do trade into like the top 5, top 10 of the second round to get NFL-ready talent, they'll try and still keep at least one of their thirds this year. They'll have to get rid of their second, obviously, but we have 2 third-round picks, which is a nice luxury to have. So what we could do is we could package that second, and then we could package our early third, and then hope that Trask falls to 102, which I think he could. But then, the Saints could also trade back up again into earlier in the third round if they think he's going to, get drafted or something along the lines of that. We saw some surprise teams that I didn't think were going to take a quarterback in the first round, snag a quarterback. So the quarterback need isn't as crazy in the second and third round, as it was before. I did not think the Bears were going to end up getting a quarterback in the first round. I think really the only teams in contention of getting a quarterback that are really going to be scary for the Saints to have to watch out for is like the Denver Broncos, maybe like the Giants, maybe the Panthers. But I think for the most part, there's no reason why Trask won't be there in the late second, early third. It just depends on where the Saints value him. I know they really, really like him. I know they also really like that receiver from Western Michigan, something like that. There's just, the Saints they're interested in a lot of dudes. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this whole thing plays out.
Yeah, so let's just jump back to the first round real quick. Who is someone that you saw that get taken yesterday and you said that is an absolute steal?
That I saw picked yesterday?
Yes.
Just because of how high I was on Caleb Farley the entire draft, I think the Titans getting Farley at 22 without having to move up is a steal. I also think Mac Jones falling to the Patriots at 15 was a really, really big steal.
Let's go. I love that pick.
Yeah, me too. My wife is a big Patriots fan as well as her
family.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that, but hey, I think the Browns getting Greg Newsome is a bit of a steal too.
That's a great pick.
Yeah, and also Darisaw falling to the Vikings, and then whoever the heck ends up with Tevin Jenkins is going to get a steal. I have him going to the Dolphins with the 4th pick in the second round.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
They didn't get it. Who'd they get? They got Waddle.
Yeah, they got Waddle, and then they got that defensive end from Miami. Not Rosu, but the other one. Yeah, Jalen Phillips. So I have them taking Tevin Jenkins with the 4th pick in the first round. Yeah, and it just makes a lot of sense. I have him. I mean, he was, in my opinion, by far the most aggressive offensive tackle in the entire draft, more so than Penei Sewell or Rashawn Slater, in my opinion. And I think, if anybody, I think he's going to be the guy that we look back on in 5 years and say, why wasn't he an early first-round pick, let alone a first-round pick, but an early first-round pick. So I think out of anybody in the second round, I think my top 3 players who I think have the biggest impact in the second round are probably like Asante Samuel Jr. I think he's going to be a great corner. I was a little bit surprised he didn't go in the first round. Elijah Moore, and then I also think Tevin Jenkins. Those are probably my 3 that I really think are going to have huge impacts very early from the second round this year.
Well, a final question for you here is, I'm a New England Patriots guy, as everyone can see from the banner right behind me. You have them mocked at pick, I'm not going to count, wherever they are in the second round, Terrace Marshall at LSU.
Mm-hmm.
I see 2 picks later, Vegas taking Barmore, someone I have been high on, even though there are some questions in regards to coaching. I know Belichick and Saban are so close. If there's any issues, I'm sure Bill has the full inside scoop there. Why do you have Marshall going to New England over someone I'm very high on at Christian Barmore?
I think just the overall appeal factor of adding another receiving talent. I think I'm a firm believer that if Devontae Smith was available and Mac Jones wasn't available, the Patriots would have taken Devontae Smith in the first round.
Oh, yeah. He wasn't going past Philly, though.
Yeah.
Even Philly was still there at 12.
Yeah. And obviously covering the Saints, you kind of get thrust into LSU news quite a bit. And I know Terrace Marshall is an absolute dog. And actually, as a matter of fact, I tweeted it not too long ago. And I was just like, if the Saints take any receiver in the first round, I want it to be Terrace Marshall. No other exception. Unless obviously like Jamar Chase or one of those guys were to fall. But in terms of like after the top 3 receivers, there's no receiver I value more than Terrace Marshall. And I just don't see him really going kind of fitting with any other team in the first few picks. You know, I think Elijah Moore is probably a perfect fit for Detroit. He just kind of fits like their hardworking culture, things like that. You know, I don't really see Detroit trying to go after a guy who sat out the majority of last season. So, you know, I just kind of think that if he's available there, I really debated putting Barmore there. I really did, just because I know it's a need, but I feel like it's a similar situation in New England as it is in New Orleans, where it's just like you're kind of in a new era still. You know, you have Cam Newton, and he's got a year of experience as the Patriots quarterback, but now you also have Mac Jones, who's going to be grooming right behind him to potentially take that spot. And then you also have Jarrett Stidham, you know, who doesn't have much experience either. So I think adding weapons, even though they had a great offseason and added some great weapons, you know, I don't remember how many of those dudes are on a 1-year deal. I'm sure there's a few of them on just like a 1-year deal. So if you can add some insurance and Terrace Marshall, allow him to learn from some great veterans and like N'Keal Harry and, you know, just the other guys you guys brought in, Kendrick Bourne, just there's a lot of great talent in New England right now. Let him learn from one of the greatest head coaches in the entire NFL, probably the greatest of all time, in my honest opinion.
Yeah.
And just let him eat. There's no reason. I think Terrace Marshall, I had him going to Baltimore in the first round, but because they took Rashad Bateman and he happened to fall, I have him going in the second round to New England. I think Terrace Marshall would be really good in a good system. I don't think he's the kind of guy that Detroit could take and see instant success. I think he's the kind of guy who has to have like a good organized system, has to be a disciplined system, something along the lines of that, which is why I kind of liked him for the Saints. You know, they're a good disciplined team. He needs to go to a team that has like a long-standing, you know, reign of success, or like, you know, a long-standing like head coach, a team that's organized, been there for a while, they know what the hell they're doing type of team. And I think Terrace Marshall could easily be a great value pick for the New England Patriots. If that happens right there, that'll be probably the biggest steal of the second round, because Terrace Marshall, in my opinion, is the number 4 receiver in the entire draft. So
wow. I'll definitely take that. If we have Mac Jones, really the only thing he needs in this offense right now, I know he's probably not going to start at the beginning of the season, but the offensive line looks strong. The tight ends have one of the best tight end rooms in the entire NFL now with Smith and Hunter Henry. The only thing they need is another wide receiver, so get the young kid some targets. I'd definitely be happy there with Marshall. Again, I would love to see the defensive line short up. That's just me. But, hey, if we take you convinced me. I think that'd be an awesome selection. Michael, before we let you go, how can our listeners follow you on social media, listen to your podcast? Tell it all right now.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Michael Balko Jr. You can find me on Instagram at Michael.Balko. Podcast is The Michael Balko Show. It's on all streaming platforms, Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the whole 9 yards. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of this draft. I appreciate you having me on. We're going to hit it after the draft too.
Awesome. Absolutely, man. We're talking a bunch. I really enjoyed talking to you. Saints, NFL, you've been awesome. So thank you again, man.
I appreciate you.
All right, well, that's going to be it for this episode of the Alec Walt Show. I'm Alec Walt alongside Michael Balko from WhoDatDish.com. Definitely check out his stuff. What do you think of the Saints' first pick and who they could pick in the rest of this draft? Feel free to comment that below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Down the Block Sports for more of my exclusive content. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you very soon.